nice.
That's what, by the way, Kevin Love, who I like, friend of the show.
You wanted him to jump.
I didn't want him to come over, try to take this weak sauce charge, because this is what can happen to you. First of all, it could be an injury. Luckily, nobody got hurt. Second of all, this can happen to you. No, you say,
but he missed.
Oh, you say, oh, if you get...
That's right.
I'm watching the whole thing, and we're excited about the miss.
It's the best miss we've seen this year. I'll give you that. But he missed.
Listen, it
like
might
a
be
Beckham
the best.
highlight.
It might be the best missed dunk
ever.
Since, well, no.
In the history of missed dunks.
No.
In the history of failed shots, this is right up there.
Vince Carter in college against Duke at Carolina had about a 50-foot windmill alley-oop attempt that would have been, it was at the tail end of the game. Vince still says that would have been the best dunk of his career. This is the best missed dunk since then. But Kevin Love, man, contest or get out the way. This is how people get hurt. And by the way, people say, oh, I don't want to show up on a poster. You want a poster now anyway. Coach, look at that right there.
That could be a poster because we don't know.
Nobody
10
knows.
years from now, they won't know. The kids won't know who did make it or miss it.
Yeah, Ja is sensational.
But if he had jumped, he still would have been on the poster.
That's fine. Not like that.
Face would have been
not with a man's.
place.
That looks bad.
You know,
that looks
midsection all up in your grill.
Back to the Eagles now, who beat the Cowboys yesterday despite all their injuries, despite an inconsistent season, and despite doubt about their quarterback's leadership. Carson Wentz was impressive, completing 78% of his passes for 319 yards. So all Philly has to do now is beat the Giants next week, and they are in the playoffs. Here is Carson Wentz after the game.
Resilient team, resilient bunch. Guys just, hey, man down, next man up. And then we've had that mindset, and guys just keep believing, keep fighting, keep believing. You've seen it in the last couple of weeks. You saw it today. Guys never looked down and just kept going, and it was fun out there tonight.
It's disappointing, it's frustrating, but we all take responsibility. And as I said, it begins with me, and we're too talented, and we just didn't execute the way that we're capable of doing, and they did.
We talked a lot about these two quarterbacks who started coming into the season, all throughout the season, and yet here we are. There were two 7-7 teams going up against each other. From what you saw yesterday, did it put Wentz versus Dak debate to bed as well as Carson Wentz played?
No, I don't think so. Look, I've always said Carson Wentz is the better physical player as far as throwing the football. I don't think there's ever been any question about that. But this was one win. Not even a playoff game. I get it. It was like a playoff game, but it wasn't a playoff game. Over a 7-7 team that's highly dysfunctional. You scored 17 points. Now, Wentz has played great over the last month. He obviously carried a bunch of guys who, are third and fourth stringers. His best running back's out. His three best wide receivers are out. His tight end gets banged up and plays half the game. So I get it. He was better than Dak yesterday. But there have been too many. A backup quarterback came in and took the locker room from you and won a Super Bowl. Your leadership has been questioned in report after report after report. I'm not going to overlook all of that because you won a late regular season game. Dak has a lot of room for growth. Don't get me wrong. However, one thing that's not up for question is his leadership, is how he can galvanize a locker room, how he can be the face of a franchise, how he has a lot of strong personalities in that locker room behind him. Wentz, I think, is benefiting from maybe some of these stars or near-star players being out. Those are some of the ones that seem to have questioned his leadership. And now these young guys that just want to, prove they can play in the NFL are following him. So, again, Wentz is the better thrower of the football, no question. But I think Dak still has the greater intangibles. So I do still think it's up for debate. Let's see if Philly even wins next week.
To be clear, not only do you think it's up for debate, right now you think Dak's the guy you'd rather have, correct?
Yes. Yes, he is the guy I would rather have.
Well, you look at this, and at the end of the day, it's hard to say either guy has done anything to where you have a real conviction about their ability to consistently put a team in a position to compete for a championship. Because at the end of the day, it's two 7-on-7 teams that have been disappointing in their own ways throughout the course of the season, battling against each other in another sort of disappointing outcome. And you didn't think you'd be here with these two players, or a lot of people didn't think you'd be here with these two players. And I think your point on Carson is a great point. He's succeeding with a bunch of guys that are back end of the roster guys that haven't had any issues, haven't had any conflict with him in the locker room. And maybe this is what Philadelphia is going to have to do. Maybe they're going to have to move on from some of those offensive stars and put guys in place with Carson that can grow with him. And I do agree with you that the one thing that is certain about Dak is his leadership. Now, can he galvanize a locker room? I think that they like him, but you'd think galvanizing would mean you would have seen those guys come out and play with a lot more intensity and emotion, and he'd be lifting these guys in these biggest moments, and that's still a big question mark.
The debate's obviously not closed, but Carson Wentz, to my eye, went into the year ahead in the debate, and now he's going to close the year ahead in the debate, even though Dak, over the course of the season, had the more statistically impressive season. Carson Wentz, coming out of college, was a blue chipper. Dak was not. That is a check mark in his favor. Carson Wentz, to the eye test, to what you were talking about, better thrower of the football, wins that, to me, by a wide margin. And Carson Wentz now also can say, I can win a big game too. Your two biggest questions, tell me if I'm misquoting you, about Wentz going into the year. Can he make it through a season healthy? That was the first one, right? Mm-hmm. He's now checked that box, as pending week 17. Can he win a do-or-die game? This wasn't a playoff game, technically, but if they lost, their season was over. So it had the stakes of a playoff game. And it's not only, because, Jenna, you know this, I'm not exactly the quarterback wins stat guy. But so how did you play in the win? He had the best completion percentage he's had all season. He had the most yards per attempt he's had all season. He had the second most total yards he's had all season. He had one of his 4 best passer rating games he's had all season, despite the motley crew of people around him, despite the fact that you're playing a team whose season is also on the line. Compare that to Dak. How did Dak play not only last night, but in the biggest games they've had this year? They've now played 5 games against teams, we can show it, against teams that are currently leading the division. Philly twice, New Orleans, Green Bay, and New England. 3 touchdowns, 6 picks. 2 of those touchdowns came in garbage time against Green Bay. A passer rating below 80. A completion percentage in the low 60s. Now, against everybody else, Dak's made his MVP case. 23 touchdowns, 5 picks, a 106 rating. In their biggest spots, he's played his worst this year. That is for a guy whose biggest attribute is he's a winner, he's a gamer. Now, half of your years, your team has missed the playoffs. Half of your years, you have not won your division, even though there's only been 1 year. There's been another great team in that division. That was 2 years ago, those Philadelphia Eagles.
So you outlined all the advantages that Carson had in terms of being a blue chipper and athletically. Wouldn't you say that to this point he's underachieved? And when you look at what Dak has done, wouldn't you say that he's overachieved?
Yes.
And to say that Dak hasn't been successful in big games. He has had some big games that he's been very successful in the playoff game, right?
Playoff game.
So now the question is, we've seen what Carson did in this moment, but it isn't a playoff game. We could argue it's equivalent to it, but what is he going to do as in those pressure-filled moments moving forward? This is a nice check mark to have. I don't know that you can end a debate at this point.
I agree with you. It's not ended. My point is that it's very interesting. Going into this game, you had Dak ahead. You had it about even. I had Carson ahead. Coming out of the game, you have Dak ahead. You have it about even. And I have Carson still ahead, which is probably the fair way to do it. One game should not be the end-all, be-all on any of those things. But just follow up your point. I would agree with you that Carson, because of health and among other things, has underachieved to a degree, and Dak has overachieved. But if I'm a 4.2 40 guy and you're a 4.9 40 guy, you can run the fastest 40 you've ever run, and I can run my slowest of the year, and I still beat you. So even if Carson was here and Dak was here, and Dak's moved his play all the way to here, and Carson's underachieved to here, he's still ahead to me in the race.
Well, another thing though is health, and that, I mean, if you were picking which quarterback was going to lead your franchise going forward, you would have to consider that. And you're right, Carson's healthy this year, but this is the first time since what, like his freshman year in college or something, that he's actually hasn't had any injuries. So I think Dak goes out, plays yesterday, no excuses, and he didn't make any, which I think is